Two hitters stand out in this postseason because of what they do that's different than other hitters, and they each teach us a different lesson about how pivotal postseason decision-making can be. Juan Soto is the first. If you look at the top left-handed hitters in baseball, they all have something in common. They create a lot of damage down in the zone. This goes for Shohei Ohtani, who for the most part slugs absolutely everywhere in the zone. It also goes for Gunnar Henderson, who has a strong lean for contact down and inside. It applies to Yordan Alvarez, Bryce Harper, and Freddie Freeman as well. Juan Soto doesn't create a lot of damage down in the zone. His 149 slug this season on pitches in what I would consider the bottom of the zone was worse than John Singleton, TJ Friedl, and Brian Rocchio. This is mainly because he just never swings at the bottom of the zone. His 14% swing rate in that same area is the lowest in baseball by a healthy margin. But he's 80% better than the league average hitter this season. That's the second best mark in baseball because he destroys everything middle and above with a supreme ability to cover the top of the zone. If you look at his performance against four-seamers, sinkers, and cutters from right-handed pitchers, so on average, the hardest pitches he's going to see, he's slugging nearly double that of the league on each of those pitch types. He kind of feels like a matchup nightmare. Or is he? Hitters like Shohei Ohtani are really hard to prep for because they cover and create damage over every part of the strike zone. You basically have to get him to chase, and that's easier said than done. But with a guy like Juan Soto, if you're putting together a high-level scouting report, I think the 3 points are actually pretty obvious. The first one is to throw as little fastball as possible. And this goes for sinkers, cutters, and four-seamers for the reasons we already went over. Number 2 is going to be to increase slider usage. I'm going to prefer more of a gyro shape here, some more down action as opposed to more sweep. He doesn't succeed too well against those. And the number 3 point is to increase changeup usage, another pitch that he doesn't perform too well against. Soto has been worse than league average against changeups this season from a contact quality perspective, a slight fall off for him compared to last year, and he's been more average versus those short gyro slider shapes. So if your approach as a pitcher is to just not have him beat you, then increasing the usage of these 2 pitches makes sense. And my pretty intuitive plan here is exactly what the league has done against Soto this season. Relative to league average, he's seen a lot less four-seam fastballs and more changeups from right-handed pitchers than you would normally expect. As to the very obvious question as to why it hasn't worked, evidenced by the 180 WRC plus that I mentioned earlier, it's that he's so disciplined that his chase on these changeups and sliders is substantially below the league average. The Twins, for example, threw him the second highest rate of changeups this season at 33%. The result against him was productive from a contact quality allowed standpoint, but they put him on base at a 40% clip. Was this successful? I guess if your goal was to not let him beat you, yes. The problem is that there's such a fine line for the slider or changeup heavy approach to work against him because of his lack of chase. Your window for changeup success is basically this band in the zone right here. If you pull your changeup back over the middle of the plate, it's a barrel. He covers everything over the middle of the plate. And if you're off the plate with it, he's probably not swinging. So this is really your only lane, in the zone, down away. This brings us to the lesson that Juan Soto teaches us, and it's not really about hitting. If you're a pitcher facing off against a very good hitter, more often than not, that very good hitter has discipline. And in those situations where you're facing a disciplined hitter, it is really nice to have good command. Stuff is king. We know that. I love velocity. I talk about it all the time, but that's in the aggregate. That applies to the vast majority of pitchers. When you get down to specifics against a hitter that is one of the best in baseball, being able to not even dot a pitch, but just miss less than average, I think you give yourself a better shot of putting away really good hitters, even if it's just from a limiting barrel standpoint rather than the ultimate outcome of a strikeout. Even really good hitters have areas in a strike zone that they don't really create damage against specific pitch types. We saw this with Soto. And being able to target and succeed at executing a pitch in those specific spots at a higher rate than the average pitcher is pretty essential. Soto is one of the most feared hitters in baseball for good reason, but unlike an Ohtani or a Judge, there's at least a plan to take against him, even if it's hard to execute. Our second hitter we're going to talk about is one that has changed compared to last year. It's Mookie Betts. His shift in production year over year is easy to see when you look at a heat map of his expected damage from 2023 and compare it to what that expected damage looks like in 2024. The majority of his production is still coming on the inner third of the plate, but this year in particular, he struggled more than usual against pitches on the outer third of the plate, particularly breaking balls from right-handed pitchers. Now, you'd think the league would see this and go, oh, great, we're just going to throw him 30 to 40% breaking balls away. But remember our Soto example, good hitters generally have discipline. Instead, what's happened is that he's seeing a bit more four-seam fastball than usual. Pitchers are trying to take back count leverage against him. Last year, I'm not entirely sure what the league was doing, throwing him four-seamers middle up in the zone. This year, they've come to their senses for the most part and pushed almost all of those four-seamers up away. As a result of this, we see a performance drop versus right-handed four-seamers. He's just getting less hittable pitches and as a result is not doing as much damage. And while he's doing a really good job touching up any slider that misses back into the heart of the zone, when those sliders have any semblance of sweep, he struggled pretty mightily. Although we're not looking at a lot of balls in play against what I'm going to classify as a sweeper for the sake of argument, which is basically 8 inches or more of sweep, Mookie Betts' expected WOBA on contact, so removing plate discipline from the equation, is in the bottom 15%. So 85% of right-handed hitters have created more potential for damage than Mookie has on sweep this season. Once again, it kind of feels like the scouting report here is somewhat easy. Our two main points of emphasis are number one, avoid throwing sinkers or anything on the inner third of the plate. Mookie Betts has absolutely demolished that pitch this season. The second is to lean on sweep on the outer third of the plate, as we talked about. You also have two more peripheral nuggets of getting your four seam up and away, which is, again, a hat tip to command. And then you could also lean on right changeups, which is just generally a pitch he doesn't succeed on and is underutilized by the league as a whole. But as we saw with Soto, it is never this easy. Mookie broke his hand early in the season, and since he's returned, we've gotten some sample, but not a lot of sample, of him covering these four-seam fastballs up away. Take this at-bat versus Joe Musgrove towards the end of the season. Musgrove falls behind 2-0. He breaks out what's tagged as a cutter, but really has more of a slider shape down in the zone, which Betts probably should have touched here, but instead he swings through it. And then instead of doubling up on lateral break or anything down away, Musgrove goes to the region of the zone that a lot of the league has targeted against Mookie this season, up away with a fastball. And Mookie is right on that pitch for a single. Good hitters make adjustments. Mookie has to be aware of this hole up away against four-seam fastballs. The lesson here is a question you have to ask yourself when doing what teams call advanced prep against a hitter, which is really heightened as you get into the postseason. I think you could look at this in a few ways. A, we only believe in large sample, so maybe looking at 23 and 24 is better than just looking at a single season in 2024. B, we believe in medium-sized samples, so let's just take a full season and really not hyper-focus down. And then C is that we're hyper-focused on recent adjustments, which in Mookie's case means we believe there was an adjustment by him after breaking his hand that disqualifies that early season sample. My personal lean would be more towards recent samples, so I think I would start with, say, a 100-game sample of a hitter and then hyper-focus down to the most recent 30 or so games and see if there's an adjustment in that smaller period of time. If I then saw an adjustment that I thought was substantial, I would lean pretty heavily on coaches and biomech individuals to help gauge my confidence in whether something has fundamentally changed in a hitter like Mookie Betts that makes me even more confident in the small sample we're looking at. The beauty of the postseason is that these small bets, these small decision points that I've kind of nestled throughout this video are heightened in terms of their impact, whether it be on a guy like Soto, assuming that, hey, maybe Soto actually understands that changeups are coming and he's worked on them, or a guy like Betts and assuming that this recent sample is not actually as important as the aggregate, so we could continue to throw safe fastballs up away. These are two things I'm watching this postseason. I love the postseason for these very reasons. This hitter-pitcher matchup thing is so fascinating to me, especially when you get to see multiple interactions between one pitcher and one hitter. You really get into the game theory of baseball that is in the fabric of game watching. So I hope you enjoy the postseason. If there's anything you're watching in particular, or you think there's any other distinct hitters in baseball in terms of what they do from a plate coverage standpoint, let me know. I will be in the comments as always. Thank you for watching.